Hi, and welcome to P Red Recipes. Today we'll be cooking menudo, and you have the recipe there. From a 5 pounds, the one that's on the left, and the 10 pounds recipe is on the right. So I made both so you can follow along. The ingredients is going to be California peppers, limes, chicken bouillon, hominy, onion, cilantro, and garlic. All right, garlic cloves and laurel leaves. Here you have the beef foot, what we're going to use. For the amount I'm making, I'm going to make 15 pounds, so I'll use 2. But typically, ask your butcher to either come pre-cut, and then all you have to do is cut the hoof in half. And then you have your tendons here, which you want to cut in half too. That way they're bite-sized. And of course, you have your tripe. You have 2 types of tripe here. You have your traditional tripe, which is more plain. And then you have the second tripe, which is a honeycomb tripe. You can see the resemblance, why they call it honeycomb. Okay. So this is how the beef foot looks after you cut it. So the tendons are on the top, they're bite size, and just cut them off from the bone, and so it'll be good. The tripe or menudo, you want to cut it in long portions. I typically cut them to 1 or 1 1/4. It doesn't have to be exact, but just what I always recommend is make sure they're bite size, and you could use a tablespoon, and if it fits in there, you've done a perfect job. So we're going to finish cutting the rest of this tripe. Again, there's no science to it, just cut away. Now, once you cut it, you put it aside. Now, the traditional tripe, this one sometimes has more of a fatty tissue, and you need a little bit more cleaning. There you see the fatty tissue, and just skim it off. You're going to skim off all the fat, clean it up, put it aside, throw it away, and you want to get all that fat. Once you clean it real good, you cut it in long pieces again, just like the first tripe. And again, just bite-sized pieces is the key. Next, we're going to bring the water. We're going to put it in a pot. For the amount I'm making 15 pounds. I used about almost 4 gallons of water. Bring it to a boil, add salt and lemon. I'm sorry, not lemon, onion. We're going to add an onion in there and some salt. Bring it to a boil. Once it's at the boil, we're going to add the beef foot. Again, for this recipe, I'm making 15 pounds, so I added 2 beef foot, 3 pounds of tendons, 5 pounds of traditional menudo or tripe, and 10 pounds of the honeycomb tripe. We're going to cook this for approximately 1 hour. We're going to put it in high heat till it boils. And once it's boiling, you want to skim all the little foam that comes on the top. Once it's done, then we're going to add the tripe to the same stock. Add it in there. So we add it in there. And once we add all the tripe in there, again, keeping the heat on high. After we add all the tripe, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the vegetables in there. So you have your California chilies, green chilies, or Anaheim chilies, what they call. I cut them in half, but not all the way through on the tops to keep them intact. And then I take the membrane out with a spoon, just rub it off. And that typically works pretty good. So once we take all the membrane out of them, clean it up real quick. I also like to cut the stems out, so that way they're not just floating around, because sometimes they'll tend to get soft and then just float around in the pot. So if you cut them off, you avoid all that. So once you cut the stem off, you clean it up, you grab these and you simply just dump them in the pot. The next thing is I use a cheesecloth, kind of pocket sock, or whatever you want to call it. This is usually used for turkeys when you're cooking turkeys and you put all the other ingredients in there. So I use it so it doesn't float around the pot. So I add my 3/4 of a cilantro bunch in there. The 6 garlic cloves, I crush them down so they can release the flavor. Throw it in this sock, if you want to call it, and simply tie it. So again, so they're not floating around. People are not, chewing in garlic chunks, and the cilantro doesn't just float around the whole pot. So this keeps it all together while releasing the flavor. And again, simply grab it and throw it in the pot. Also, I add 3 laurel leaves. You'll find these at your grocery store, and throw them in there. And I also like to add 4 key limes, or Mexican limes. It's the smaller limes that you see at their store. And simply squeeze them into the pot. I use a strainer so the seeds don't fall in there and people have this aftertaste if they bite into a seed. So once I squeeze the 4 limes, again, keep it in high heat. And we'll add the next ingredients after that. So we want to stir it a little bit. So our next ingredients we're going to add is chicken bouillon. All right. If you have beef bouillon, it's the same. I prefer the chicken. So I'm going to get a tablespoon. And heaping tablespoons. What is a heaping? That it's filled as much as you can get on that spoon. So again, for the quantity I'm making, 4 gallons of water, 15 pounds of tripe, 4 heaping spoons is perfect. Once I add it in there, I'm going to mix all the stock. Also keep in mind, try to reach the bottom because sometimes the beef foot will stick. So we're going to let it boil for approximately 3 hours. And after the 3 hours, you want to pull out the tripe out and taste it. If it's nice and tender, it's ready. If it needs, then check it every 20 minutes to make sure you're at that when it's there. But 3 hours should be enough to cook the tripe on high heat. So after it's there, heating up on high heat, also ensure that once it reaches the boil, you turn it down to a medium heat, which is called a rolling boil. It's still boiling, but it's not like super boiling. Next, we're going to get the cans of hominy. We're going to drain them all out. All right. Once we drain all the water out of the hominy, then we're going to simply add them straight into the pot without water. And for this recipe, I'm adding 2 cans and simply give it a good, mix. It mixes really well in there. And we're going to bring it out back to a high on the flame. We're going to bring it to high heat and put the lid on there. Let it boil like it is there. We'll let it boil for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. And once it's there, once it's boiled, you can turn it off, bring the heat down, and you're ready to serve and enjoy your nice menudo with you can add crushed chili peppers and lemon. Enjoy.